Hello and welcome to Transformed Pod. Today you are with your co-host Heather, and we're going to be talking about a trauma bond and what a trauma bond is and no contact after a trauma bond. So a trauma bond is an emotional attachment that forms between an individual and somebody who is abusive, manipulative or toxic. And as a result of a cycle of abuse and emotional manipulation, despite the harm that's being caused to the person on the receiving end of it, the bond becomes difficult to break because it's really similar to an addiction because of the tense highs and lows. Now, there's often cycles of abuse and reconciliation within a trauma bond. So it can be, a lot of love, affection, love bombing, and then, some devaluation, things like this, which creates confusion and attachment within the victim. The emotional manipulation, the gaslighter or abuser often use tactics like gaslighting or guilt, trying to make you doubt your reality, and isolation to either control you, which reinforces the bond within the victim. This can leave the victim feeling really trapped within the relationship. They believe they can't leave it, either because of emotional dependency, fear of manipulation from the abuser, or they can really feel like they deeply need this person and that they are really, really in love with them. The victim often denies the severity of the abuse and makes excuses because they often believe that the abuser is a good person, or they believe the things that the abuser is saying, and that they often think that the abuser really loves them deep down. This can cause an intense emotional connection. So despite the abuse, the victim is going to feel a really emotional, powerful connection with the abuser. And this is what makes it really, really hard to leave, because the brain starts to associate these extreme emotional ups and downs with love and attachment. So why does the trauma bond happen? So intermittent reinforcement. So it's this unpredictability and kindness and affection from the abuser that keeps the victim emotionally invested. It's very, very similar to being like hooked on gambling. So it's like you never know when this sort of stroke of luck is ever going to come back. And it's been shown that it does the same thing, to the brain. So, somebody can be gambling and they lose, and then they win and they get that high, and then it's lose and then win, and they never kind of know. And it can also really damage somebody's self-worth. So ongoing abuse can make them feel really unworthy of a healthier relationship, and that they can't survive without the abuser. The trauma bonding can be so psychological, that it's the attachment of the abuser is a way to survive that emotional pain that the abuser brings. So when it comes to breaking a trauma bond, it is very, very difficult because of what happens really within the brain. So the intermittent reinforcement, this inconsistent behaviour, releases dopamine, which is this feel-good neurotransmitter. And the unpredictability of these moments creates such a powerful craving for that positive reinforcement, that kindness, that love bombing, that it leaves the victim constantly hoping for more positive moments even after the cycles of abuse. So, sometimes it can happen where in the early stages the person is constantly being love bombed, and then develop, and they just pray for this, the good times again. Now, oxytocin is known as the love hormone, and this plays a key role in forming emotional bonds. And in a trauma bond, oxytocin is still released during the moments of reconciliation or affection, love bombing and things like this, which strengthens the attachment to the abuser. So this makes it really difficult for the victim to leave, as they're still connected to the abuser despite the abuse. And this hormone is usually involved in healthy relationships, but in the context of abuse, it can keep the victim emotionally tied to the abuser. And it creates like a false sense of security and intimacy. And then we have, stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. So cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone. In an abusive relationship, the constant fear, stress and anxiety trigger the release of cortisol. So it keeps the victim in a state of heightened alertness. It's the fight or flight response. If you don't know what the fight or flight response is, it's basically it's a biological thing that sort of kept us going. It's when we perceive a threat or perceive danger, and it's like if a tiger is chasing, our fight or flight response is gonna sort of essentially kick off. But in the form of abusive relationships and things like that, the stress of it can also make the fight or flight response sort of become active. And then adrenaline is also released during the stressful or abusive moments. So together, cortisol and adrenaline prepare the body for danger. So this can leave the victim feeling constantly on edge or anxious. And over time, this chronic stress response wears down the brain and the body. So this can contribute to mental health issues like anxiety, depression, and even post-traumatic stress disorder. So the fear conditioning in the amygdala is part of the brain, and this is the part that's responsible for processing emotions, particularly fear. So in a trauma bond, the amygdala becomes hyperactive due to the repeated exposure of stress and fear from the abuse. So the victim may feel, that they're frightened of leaving due to the consequences or standing up to the abuser. And these fears can just be around, it might not be like an actual physical danger. It could be around the fear of leaving the relationship, that withdrawal and things like that from this person can be really, really hard. And this can lead to an irrational fear of breaking free, even though, if somebody knows that relationship is harmful, and you get people like, why are you still with this person? This person's not good for you, this person's treating you badly, but you're still there. And it's often because of all these things combined. Now, the prefrontal cortex is what controls the reasoning and decision making and impulse control. And in a trauma bond, the stress and emotional manipulation weaken this part of the brain. So it makes it really difficult for the person to be thinking clearly or making any decisions about leaving the relationship. So this can leave somebody struggling to weigh up the pros and cons, whether they should leave, whether they should stay, and they can doubt their own judgment. And this can be because of the cognitive impairment that is made worse by, the gaslighting and the manipulation from the abuser. So it's an addiction-like cycle. So the combination of dopamine, the reward, cortisol, the stress, it creates an addictive cycle, and the brain becomes so conditioned to seek out the highs, the moments of like affection and love, after enduring, the devaluation, the lows, the abuse, that it creates a loop which is so similar to substance addiction. So the victim becomes dependent on this abuser for the emotional hits, even though the relationship is really, really harmful to them. So just like breaking an addiction, it is just as hard to break free from an abuser or a trauma bond, because it is going to trigger all these withdrawal-like symptoms, which is, emotional distress, cravings for contact, and the fear of being alone. The trauma bond as well can also lead to cognitive dissonance, where the victim experiences conflicting thoughts. They know that the relationship's not good for them, they know it's harming them, but they hold on to the belief that the abuser loves them and that things will change, because oftentimes, they are being told that things will change, it's going to get better, or they're sorry. So this can cause a massive inner conflict, which can make it harder to break the bond. And then you have the memory of it. So the hippocampus, which is involved in memory and emotional regulation, it's affected by chronic stress and trauma. So this can cause issues with remembering past abuse or minimizing the severity of it. So this allows the victim to focus on the good parts of the relationship, and over time chronic stress can shrink the hippocampus, making it even harder to think clearly or to remember those really harmful aspects within the relationship. Now, how do you navigate no contact when you have been in a trauma bond and you are trying to break through it? So you have to remember, you've got to understand the nature of the bond. So you need to recognise that it's the emotional attachment and that you are feeling as a result of the manipulation. And oftentimes it's not genuine love or connection, and acknowledge that those highs and lows of the relationship have conditioned your brain to crave the abuser's, approval and affection. And this understanding what's happening to your brain and things like this can help you resist the urge to reach out. No contact is extremely important when it comes to overcoming a trauma bond. Blocking all forms of communication, that if you can, obviously if you have children or whatever with this person, it's more difficult, but contact should be very, very limited. If you can, block all forms of communication. This is phone calls, texts, emails, social media, everything, because seeing the post is likely to trigger you. And it's going to help you avoid the temptation of reconnecting with this person. Stay away from places there might be, or mutual spaces where you have like a likelihood of running into them, because this is going to reduce any exposure that you have to this person, and it's really key to breaking the cycle. So it's really important. Set a specific time frame for no contact, whether it's a month or two, because having this time period in your mind can help you stay focused. So during that time, you want to be reevaluating how you feel and decide whether to extend the period. Because in trauma bonds, staying committed to the no contact rule can provide the emotional distance needed to regain that clarity and strength. Another one is prepare for the emotional withdrawal, because you are likely to experience such intense feelings, because it is similar to addictions. You're going to have cravings to reach out or hear from them. You're going to feel anxious and sad because of this sudden disconnection of the attachment that you have to them. And no doubt you'll be sort of fearful of being alone, and this is going to make you doubt your decision. But it's really important to understand that these are normal feelings and they will subside over time. So it's important to remind yourself that these feelings are going to be temporary, and that you're working towards a long-term emotional freedom away from this person. So you need to be replacing the bond that you have with this person with healthy connections. So this can be leaning on supportive friends and family. Surround yourself with people who care about your well-being, because they are going to offer you encouragement and perspective when you feel like breaking this no contact. A professional therapist can help. It can help you identify unhealthy patterns to build healthier coping strategies. Just having that one-to-one with somebody that understands a trauma bond and what you need to do to go through it and come out of the other end of it. Having somebody that can give you tips and strategies is going to be really important. And another part of it is going to be building your sense of self, because a trauma bond often totally destroys with self-esteem and identity. Really focusing on yourself is going to help. So engage in hobbies or activities that you once enjoyed, and you may have neglected them due to the relationship. So it's really important to have those things for yourself, because setting personal goals will help you regain a sense of accomplishment and rebuild your confidence. In practicing self-care, so meditation is really good for the anxiety and things like that, because it's going to help regulate your nervous system. So that's quite an important one. And then journaling, because that's journaling down your feelings is going to help you navigate those feelings and help you gain some clarity. And doing anything that helps you reconnect with yourself. What do you like to do? What makes you happy? Anything that you have that is outside of this relationship. And identifying and avoiding any triggers. So it could be maybe you had a favourite song together, or you always went to a certain restaurant together, or you did a certain thing together while you were trying to overcome this trauma bond. It's really important to avoid these types of things that are going to trigger you and make you think about your abuser and want to reconnect with them. If you have an anniversary coming up or any significant date, this is likely to be a trigger. So knowing that you will be triggered on this date, make sure you have some support around you for those dates, because these are the dates that are likely to make you feel weaker, where you are all going to want to reconnect with this person. And it's important, because of oftentimes with these cycles of abuse, tend to forget the negatives and focus on the positives, because over time those negatives sort of feel like a distant memory, and we'll remember all the good things, the good times when you were being love bombed. So making a list of all the harmful things that the abuser did to you is going to help you resist that temptation to break the no contact. It's going to keep you grounded in the reality of what this attachment with them was, and it'll reinforce the decision that you left and why you are doing no contact. Be kind to yourself. If you do reach out and break no contact, don't beat yourself up about it. This is a natural thing. People find it very, very hard to leave a trauma bonded relationship, and healing isn't linear. So every step forward that you take matters. But if you do have a day when you have broke the no contact, just be kind to yourself and understand that this is a natural part of the healing process. Visualize a healthier future. Visualize what your life is going to be like when you have moved on from this person and you no longer feel trauma bonded to them. How will your life be with this emotional freedom that you are going to have? And you're going to envision a more empowered version of yourself. And these, if you manage to do a week no contact, celebrate it. And then if you do a month, celebrate it, because this is going to reinforce your goal. This positivity from it is going to keep you motivated to keep that no contact going. But it's really, really important to be really kind and compassionate to yourself and not beat yourself up for either being trauma bonded, staying with this person, or going back to this person. Maybe you've went back to them 20 times over and you're beating yourself up about it. It's really important that you don't do that and really practice some self-compassion. I'm going to leave that there with you today. If you would like any more information, check out our website at Transformed Life Coaching. We also have our Instagram and TikTok, and the links are in the bio. Bye.